You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup County Councillors Caucus Roundtable, the forgotten powerhouse of the Irish political system, with me, Roisin Chleirigh.
And me, Paul Brophy. And today, Roisin, on episode 4 of the County Council Roundtable Caucus here on the Irish Political Roundup, we're delighted to be joined once again by councillors from across Ireland. So we'll start with two of our resident councillors, Councillor Michael Sheehan, who is an independent councillor on Wexford County Council and is an elected representative since 1999. We're also delighted to be joined by Councillor John Leahy, who has been a member of Offaly County Council since 2009, and he's also the current Cllrh of Offaly County Council. And also joining us here on the Irish Political Roundup, County Councillors Roundtable Caucus, is Councillor Albert Deasy, who represents the Cork Southwest Ward on Cork City Council, and Albert was elected for the first time there in June 2024. And also joining us for the first time here on the County Councillors Roundtable Caucus is Waterford-based independent councillor, Councillor Joe O'Riordan, who represents the Dungarvan local electoral area, and Joe was elected to Waterford City and County Council as well for the first time in June 2024. So, gentlemen, you're all very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Well, Michael, we'll start with yourself. You're in the news there recently. You're causing a little bit of mischief when you were talking about the local infrastructure scheme, which is used for rural roads and rural lanes, and you were saying that urban areas were being left out.
Yeah, Paul, and thanks for the invitation to you and Roisin, and welcome to the lads. And we're getting an old hand at this now at this point, so it feels like here we are at Groundhogging Day again. But yeah, look, for anybody who's in the city, this may not be, or anybody who's in an urban area, this may not be a thing for them. But there are two schemes out there called the LIS, the Local Improvement Scheme, and the CIS, the Community Improvement Scheme. And both of them are funded directly by the government. And the LIS is 100% supported by the government, where the CIS is a percentage of the work is either given in labour or in money by the local residents who are on a particular lane. So all of us at some point in time will agree a programme of works, and there'll be a list of lanes that need to be done, and the value of how much the engineers work out, how much it's going to cost to do that lane, and what the local contribution will be, hence the LIS local and the C community. And that's fine, that's fair enough. And the difficulty I have is I live in both an urban and a rural area, but in the towns, estates that are either taken over by the local authority or about to be taken by the local authority, the roads are falling apart, and the roads budget and everything else comes out of the one pot. And my argument was, and of course, you know, like the lads wouldn't be 100% different from mine. You know, we have 6 local councillors on the municipal authority. I live in just on the outskirts of town. John Dwyer is on the outskirts of town, and the rest of them live in the rural areas. So the LIS and CIS is it's almost like a religious study to them. So if we go after that, it tends to be a very you're hitting a nerve. But the difficulty, what I was saying is that, look, in the middle of the town, you've got estates that and previous to now, for this week, previous before then, I ended up in the paper saying that the surface of some of these estates was reminiscent of Mars and Jupiter and Uranus. So it kind of created a bit of a kerfuffle, nothing much about it. But the difficulty is there are estates in the town, old estates, right, that are 20, 30 years old, and the condition of the road is just appalling. And the engineer has gone around, we've had a look at it now, and there'd be the one particular estate I'm thinking of, is a place called Ponsfield, and there'd be about 100 houses in there, and it would cost somewhere between 75 and 90,000 euros to upgrade just the roads and the footpaths and everything like that, which is fine. And, you know, we will work towards getting that done, part thereof, or get it done in the next year. But the difficulty I had is that we spent 120,000 on the LIS, and that had roughly about 10 or 11 houses on it. And my argument to my colleagues, who are all based in the middle of the country, so they were not really having their listing years on, was that we would be better off spending that money in the towns and in the urban areas and in states where you'd have 100 houses for the same bang as you would for 12 or 13 houses on a lane. So obviously that was met with absolute shock and awe. And then I said, well, hold on a second. In New Ross Town, we've got places like Cross Lane and Windmill Lane and other places that end in lane. And could they apply for the LIS because it's a laneway? And of course, the officials were like, actually, yes, they could because it's open to them. But the communities around like, it isn't. So, yeah, it turns out, it's a question of parity of esteem and it's a question of equity. And of course, I wouldn't take anything from the LIS because the people in the private estates or private laneways in the rural areas are entitled to a good road surface as we are too. However, you've got estates where there's 100 units or 100 houses. They all pay the local property tax, and they have a right to have their estate done just as much as everyone else. And so it got into a bit of a country mouse, rural mouse, and urban mouse, and kind of every mouse. But like it went around the house at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I think one thing, and it's clear, it's coming up in all of our council meetings, no matter what district you're in, is that the roads budget is nowhere near where it needs to be, whether you're town or whether you're urban based or whether you're rural based or whether you're somewhere in between, because we have municipal districts that cross over, and the New Ross municipal crew will go out and they'll do all the roads until the boundary hits with Rosslare, and all of a sudden, so you'll have a brand new road, lovely done well, and all of a sudden it stops, and then you come into the surface of Mars, and vice versa. So I think Darragh O'Brien will be busy. I was saying it to John earlier on. One of the motions coming up is that we actually have a specific urban road or urban estate development fund where the department would give us money specifically to do estates, many of which we're now taking in charge, that have not had a light, a footpath, a road, or anything done for the last 20 to 30 years. There's a headache coming down the line for all local authorities. They have to be taken in charge. It's not a question anymore. If an estate meets the criteria, the local authority must take that estate in charge, regardless of whether the development company or the bond is in situ or not. And so what we're finding is, particularly in the older estates in town that were under the old urban councils, that yes, the urban council went in and did work in there for the ESB, did work in there in terms of the drainage and putting in manholes, but they're not taken in charge. So the difficulty is there's a headache coming down the line, but it's going to be an expensive headache.
And roads does seem to be become more and more expensive, because remember, Roisin, we were chatting to Councillor Pat Dunphy down in Moonfine during the summer, and he said to tar say a kilometre of road was like €100,000. So you multiply that by how many kilometres that need to be tarred or repaired. That's a lot of money.
Well, we have an anomaly, Paul, to be honest with you, and it is a Wexford anomaly, is that we have so many roads in the county leading towards Dublin and even towards Waterford and Cork, is that it's impossible to quantify exactly how much money it would cost to do all of them together in the same go, because the amount of road network available, I think, is one of the highest in the country. So no matter where you go in Wexford, whether it's Rosslare, Enniscorthy, Gorey, Wexford Town, or New Ross, the argument is still the same. Our roads are falling apart. And, for those of you who are quite aware, the last couple of years have been absolutely lethal in terms of climate change and the degradation of the roads. We had a storm 2 Christmases ago that wiped out 3 bridges in the local area, and the third of those bridges were only replaced there not so long ago. So yeah, road and road surface is going to be expensive, but with the amount of once in 100-year storms that we're getting every year, it's only going to go in one direction. We're going to get a lot more bills coming in. So roads is going to be a huge, huge issue.
And I have a gripe with the roads because my son is living out in Cllr, and I can't get out to his house because of the ESB are putting in the electronics for the wind turbines. And I mean, he phoned me from the Lebanon today and says, "Oh, when are you going out to the house next?" I said, "Maybe 2 weeks, because I'm going all around the sport." But they're going to have to tar the roads as well, So they're going to have to retar the roads. It's muck. And so I'll tell you, I know what the country lanes and the country roads and one-car roads are like in the rural communities where they're putting in these wind turbines. The whole roads are muck. But any more motions, Michael, coming up that you're sharing with all the county councillors?
Well, they have a couple of motions that I'm working on. One is actually, I'm looking for a special commitment from the government that they will develop a funding stream for housing estates in what would have been the former town councils, former urban councils, or former commissions. So that's one of the areas. But there is a second area now that's going to be coming on stream. And I suspect in 2026, certainly 2027, we'll be looking at, and it's a very contentious, will be assisted dying. And I think we're going to have to get our head around where that whole issue is. I would suspect that there will be a bill landing on the floor of the Oireachtas somewhere in 26 or 27, looking for Ireland to follow the same suit as the United Kingdom and look at the potential of developing a policy or a program around assisted dying. So I think that's going to be the next big battleground area. And it definitely will be a right and left. And given the last 2 weeks, we certainly now have a right and left in the country. So we'll see how that goes.
Or do we have a right and left in the country? Because as Councillor Albert Deasy said in one of our last interviews, he said there was an awful lot of people here in Ireland who were not politically represented. And that showed up in the, I'm going to say the referendum, that showed up in the presidential election, because when you think about it, 45% of the people went out to vote, 13% of those people spoiled their votes, and 7% voted for Jim Gavin, who pulled out of the election. And so that made up then that there were 20% of the spoiled votes. So is it right and left? And is there a gap between the right and left of the people who don't feel they are politically representative? So that's a good question to put to you all.
Yeah, can I jump in there, Roisin?
You can.
Yeah, no, first of all, thanks very much for having me on this evening. And I really enjoyed Michael's. I mean, I have a big thing about roads and that. And these two schemes are not, I'm not familiar with the LIS, CIS. I mean, if they're bad in Wexford, I put in a motion earlier on in this year looking for the cost from the directorate inside to make good all of our estate roads and footpaths in the 5 wards in Cork City. We came up with a figure of, they came back with a figure of 295 million, yet each ward gets 450,000 a year. So you can imagine how far that goes. So look, I won't go down that route, but maybe I'll talk to Michael about that, and he might update me on two obviously schemes. Perhaps they're just unique to the county, or what our combined city and county councils. I don't know, but just
no, they're national. They're national funded. Like your roads department and your director of service will be able to tell you what your budget are for the LIS and the CIS for 26-27 is. Yeah, directly funded by the government.
Yeah, I don't see them on a headline and the figure on the budget, but we'll have, obviously they're in there somewhere, of course, Michael, and maybe, yeah, that's great, and thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it's another way for me where to go, rooting around for money and things like that, you know. But just in relation to the kind of the left-right divide on the, I suppose that term kind of jars at me. I don't, you know, like I've gone through all sorts of, I've morphed into all sorts of things in my life. And I suppose nowadays people would label me, and I don't like labels at all, as sort of, you know, conservative or centre right or whatever it is. I think, you know, I can be very, you know, you can be anything on any given situation. So I think that what happened here in the election, really, that's a kind of a situation that was foisted on people. I mean, where we call, you know, where the traditional mainstream, well, in my experience, you know, they sat in their hands and we ended up with 2 people. So I think it's a very skewed representation. I mean, after all, if you say that the vote that came off of Catherine Connolly, you know, is the left vote, say, for example, I don't believe it is. It's partly it, and the left vote has gone nowhere from the last time with Michael D. We just have 2 candidates, same vote. It's 914,000. So, but I think I think that those, and I think the media and the parties themselves are making it a divisive issue. You know, there's lots of different things we all combine together on and come together on different stories, and, you know, but that hasn't happened. So, but we call it largely and again, if they were, we'll talk about the Labour, or the kind of the left, which generally is regarded as socialist. You know, they weren't jumping up and down saying we need more people in the ring. Like, we know we need proper representation for all of the people. And at the same time, then we'll call it the right, which again, I apologize for, but we know who we're talking about. They facilitated this. They facilitated their own demise. So I think that they've brought about they've brought about a situation which is a kind of an artificial construct of Irish society. I've no doubt within that we'll say that we call it the left divide. That of course that's there. I'm not denying that, but I think it's been massively exaggerated. And it misrepresents the real picture of life. That would be my take on it, without going in and out to how the battle was fought or not fought.
Yeah.
And Albert, what is happening in your local LEA, in your local county council, and what are you bringing up, or what are you all talking about in your area?
Again, I talk a lot about roads and infrastructure, and trying to. I mean, for example, here for I think we have a budget this year. We haven't given the actual figure of 270 million, but we have a massive park here now beside us, Bishopstown Park, and. We have everything, lovely facilities there, lovely halls, everything, tennis club, pitch and putt club, children, massive, beautiful player, but we've no toilet, but they won't fund a toilet. And, this is the kind of stuff. So I'm actually embarking, and I've just decided yesterday, no, I'm not going to get funding. So this will be my sort of headline. Now, this will be my cross. I will organise the collection of money and get all the clubs involved. So we'll have to self-fund it and do it. That's what we're going to do. Obviously, with the City Council will facilitate us, but given that they're not going to give us money, or they may give us a portion of it at the end, we're just going to have to, I'm starting it. So that's my big adventure at the moment, Roisin. Lots of other things, but just local, that's what I'm doing. Again, so I can't get a flexi bollard put up on the road here. I mean, just a simple flexi bollard. 12 months is they're missing it. It's just very difficult because again, it's all resources. If you've got 450,000 to do a huge area of the city, you can do very, very little really. So that just I won't be taking the roads into hand, but I will take the toilet into hand. All right. Thanks, Roisin.
Well, you certainly have two very experienced county councillors here who will help you in any way they can in the roads and navigate you down the right road to actually get the funding for the roads. And Councillor John Leahy up there in Birr, LEA, what are you bringing up? Are you bringing lots of the motions to the county council, and what other issues are coming up with you?
Yeah, well, Roisin got very lazy on the motions because I've kind of come up with the concept that Michael will supply them to me and I'll supply them in. The only thing about it is, I would say, is that he couldn't have picked two more divisive motions with the roads. First thing is like the LIS and CIS. Oh my dear God, he's looking for a war. But I take his point 100%. You're right, Michael, in the fact that sometimes we feel that there's not enough being done with rural roads, even though we've kind of two schemes to sort them out. But yet you have estates there that people are driving on. And the one thing I always say is that the biggest crisis in Ireland is roads, because everyone drives them. We're getting into a time now when the wet weather, dark weathers, and when someone hits a pothole, I don't know if Joe and Albert have experienced this yet, but I know Michael has. The most angriest person you will ever meet or talk to on the phone is at 8:30 in the morning when they're going to work, hit a pothole, and you're getting that call straight away. So I think roads is a massive issue. In terms of, just before I go rushing to what I'm kind of working on at the moment, very much if you look at this left side of it, I would be kind of on the same kind of sentiment as Albert. If there was a general election in the morning, would I see Mary Lou McDonald as Taoiseach of the country? Absolutely not. I don't think that the confidence is there with the electorate. I think the electorate got an opportunity to give the government an outrageous kicking, and you'll always find that people will always want to check the government when they can outside of a general election, and it's generally a local election, a referendum, or a presidential election. The main political parties didn't help themselves with let be blocking or not blocking or supporting their own candidates in the chamber. And I've said it on this program previously, in the fact that the big talking point was going to go to the spoil votes, or because there wasn't enough running in order for attention to be drawn to other candidates. If there was 6 or 7 candidates in the field, everybody would have to get 3 minutes on a show. They'd have to run that around 3 times. That's 9 minutes. Your show is over. But when you had 2 candidates, you could actually get down to see what they had for breakfast every day for the last year, and that wasn't helpful. And to be honest with you, I listened to the debate. The last debate on RTE, or maybe it was the second last debate, but it was the last debate on RTE, and I just thought, where are we coming to in terms of the questions? If the most ridiculous questions I've ever heard in my life being asked of any individual, like it was really just kind of, we're going to go to the bottom of the barrel to get as much dirt as possible. Nothing got to do with really the country. They'd ask about European, but end up then talking about something they'd done 20 years ago. You know, it's crazy, crazy stuff. Like anybody in political life that deals with so many people every day of the week, so many organizations, like, and Albert at the time touched on it. What I might decide 20 years ago would be a kind of a policy direction for me, would be a different policy direction 20 years later. And like you're being hammered then for something, and you're like, politicians have to change with the tide, but yet they were being hammered for something they said 10 or 12 years ago, and we're a different society than we were 10 or 12 years ago. But anyway, I leave that to one side. But I don't think there's a big divide. I think if there's a general election in the morning, we would probably return there or thereabouts what we have at the moment in terms of the makeup of the government. That's my opinion anyway. But just to Roisin, touch on what we're talking about. As you said, and Paul introduced you, I hear look at the council at the moment. So a lot of my conversations is probably being distracted with the budget that's coming up. So we have a CPG with management on Monday. So we'll get the draft budget. Then we have a number of meetings with the councillors. So my job was, there's a couple of changes we're making in the budget. A lot of them around kind of a couple of things that members have brought to my attention. And I suppose Michael would know this from being experienced. When you know where to look for the money, or you know where to hurt the local authority the most, you know where to go after it. And that's what I'm doing at the moment on behalf of members, where there's certain wish lists that they want. We're very, very fortunate. We have a very, very good management team to do listen. So Monday when we go in, we'll be hoping that our wish list is there. And if not, then we'll be going looking to see where we can shave off money to make sure we get what we want. So it's a chicken and egg situation. Natural enough management want to have to run the system on behalf of the people, but we have to try to get our little bit out of it as well, to get that extra little bits that they wouldn't see as relevant as we would see it. So that's where a lot of my time is going at the moment. So it's going to be a busy month in November. A lot of it also at the moment is of a lot of functions, and that's just being Cllr. So there's a lot of community groups that, you know, after the summer they're up and running, they're launching stuff. So I find myself now self-employed, and trying to get to all these functions is can be difficult. Yeah, so that's really it, Roisin, in terms of just functions but the main thing for me at the moment, and if we can get to that point in the 17th of November, which is only two and a half weeks away, we get the budget passed. But in Offaly, we've probably come from, when I joined the council, we were at 55 million. We're now at 100 million now. So we've grown, the county has grown, and that would have been on the basis of the wind turbines and various other projects that would have come into the county, to commercial rates and various other things. So that's where I am at in a nutshell.
Them wind turbines, they're the bane of my life since they started putting them in Cllr in County Kilkenny, trying to get out to my son's house. I'm going about half an hour's drive is turning into a 2-hour drive, and all up the country roads, and I'm going, where am I? And it's like looking at, you remember the Doctor Who years ago? I go, my God, they look like Doctor Who. I'm in a Doctor Who program with all the wind turbines. But so yeah, the roads, it seems to be like roads are really coming up with everybody tonight.
Yeah, roads are a big thing.
And Councillor Joe Roisin, you are a new candidate, a county councillor here on us, joining us tonight. So, like Albert, you're relatively new to the county council. So, what are you bringing up, or what's happening in your local area and the county council?
Well, basically, thanks very much for the invitation to come on tonight. It's a great opportunity, and to hear the lads talking there, you know what I mean. And you have a couple of seasoned veterans there, but Albert, I suppose, is a newbie like myself. But I've been involved in local community initiatives for years, and just I decided to go for election at the last one. Lucky enough to get in. There's a number of issues around in Waterford. You know, probably the most prominent one at the moment in terms of national media was the airport. You know, we had a vote on the airport, and we actually we had 31 councillors at it, and 30 voted for, and I was the only one who abstained. Wasn't a bit happy with the deal. You know, we didn't know the identity of the buyer. We were basically leaving 2.5 million worth of land. That's a conservative estimate, by the way. Go for €50,000. There was also a commitment from the council to write off a 670,000 loan we'd given the airport. We'd also put in 3.2 million into the airport since 2020, and and basically, you know, we were giving them a rates reduction from 76,000 down to 10,000 while the development of the new airport was on. So that was basically an open-ended kind of a thing, like, you know what I mean? There was no kind of sunrise or sunset indicated on it that it would kind of, you know, finish in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. It would be reviewed every time, you know. So I mean, I just felt like the whole thing was just, you know, was full of secrecy, you know, and it was really causing a problem for me. So basically, I abstained on it, you know. Are you there?
Yeah, we're here.
Sorry, sorry, I thought I lost you. You know, so I abstained on it. You know what I mean? I couldn't support it. There was too many questions about what the airport would be used for. Would it be used for military purposes? And I understood like that the buyer was pretty close to Donald Trump, and the US seems to be adopting a foreign militarist approach to everywhere. They're threatening war in Venezuela, Colombia, and as well as countries in the Middle East like Iran, and I just was really concerned that Waterford would end up to be a hub for this kind of traffic. The other thing that we have a problem with in our area is the housing delivery, you know. The area around Dungarvan is pretty poor, like in terms of new build. We've had no sale of a new built house to a first time buyer in the last 12 months up to June, and to my knowledge, not since then either. And in the Cllr area, which is the next area to us, in the last 24 months, there's been no sale of a new built house to a first time buyer. But the extraordinary thing is that the next area, which is Butlerstown, which is part of the city area, has one of the highest production of houses for new first time buyers in the EU. You know, so there's kind of an anomaly there where the county is kind of is actually lopsided. So that's another thing, like that, another big problem that we have. Another problem that I've identified and kind of trying to work on is council support for retail businesses, for local retail businesses. Basically, my reading situation is that there's top heavy supports for tourism and hospitality, but very little support for retail businesses. I know they give a rates rebate where you get like 9% off your rates, but you have to really jump through hoops like to get that rebate. A lot of businesses don't bother taking up on it. It's a very short-sighted report because a short-sighted approach, I should say, because retail and hospitality, basically they're symbiotic. Like one relies on the other. But if you force one out of town centres, you're going to be in trouble then, because like during the winter months, there's going to be no reason for any of it to come into town. We have a situation in Dungarvan, in the square in Dungarvan, and sure, any of you have been in Dungarvan, you probably say it's lovely in the summertime where you have seating outside all around the square, outdoor seating. But that remains there from October until May, like when the weather is totally inclement and retail businesses are dying in the centre of the town. So basically that's the situation that's kind of on the ground in Waterford. Just to make a comment on the local elections, or the presidential elections, I'd be very much on the left side of the divide. I think it was actually a spectacular victory for the left. I think it was tremendous that left-leaning parties like Sinn Féin, People Before Profit, Labour, left leaning politicians such as myself like pulled together to get Catherine Connolly, and she outstripped Michael D. Higgins's vote from the last time with a bigger turnout on the day. I was very disappointed when Simon Harris came out today and criticised he criticised the immigration figures. You know, the homeless figures are out on Friday, so I presume it's kind of a deflection tactic. The actual week on week, around half the amount of asylum seekers have been coming here in 2025 that came in 2024. So basically, it's flatlined. And the occupancy is 32,000. You know, I don't think in a country of 6 million that 32,000 is a lot of people. And also, I would say about the spoil vote, you know, thing. I mean, we're getting the same effect in this country that they have in England and they have in America, where you have this nebulous sort of criticism of immigrants and this sort of this sort of any incident involving immigrants is seen to be a red line issue. If you put people into a hotel and they're living in a room, like, which a lot of are living in rooms, I mean, there's going to be tensions, obviously going to be tensions. But in terms of the statistics, I don't think, there's this thing about our daughters aren't safe. There's knife crimes increase and all like that. Like, there's no statistics to back that up, like that this is coming from immigrants, that this increase is coming from immigrants, that immigrants are responsible for any crime wave. So I'd be a bit worried, like, that when you have people coming like Tommy Robinson coming from England and getting a crowd in Dublin of Irish people supporting him, and people tying tricolours on lampposts around the streets, weaponizing our flag. I come from a very Republican background. In the background there is my grandfather's he was a member of the flying column, and they use this thing, they turn in their grave. Oh my God, terrible. What would the men of 1916 do? The men of 1916, we don't know what they would have thought, but to suddenly assume like that these men of 1916 or 1918 to 1922 would have been rabid racists, like a lot of these people are, is kind of reaching a bit far. And I just think myself like that it's over played. This whole the immigration thing is overplayed. I do believe, all right, though, that the government made an awful mistake, that when the Ukrainian war started, that there was so many Ukrainians came in here at a time of the housing crisis, and they created a problem by giving the Ukrainians €800 tax free to compete with Irish people who were trying to get houses. I thought that was a real problem. I thought it was really short-sighted, and it caused huge aggravation. And I believe the government policy as regards immigration has caused huge aggravation, and allowed a situation whereby the far right, I'll call them, are suddenly kind of on the bandwagon about immigration, and they're using that as a weapon. So that's my 2 cents worth on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's 200,000 people spoiled their vote. And Roisin, we were the other day, we were kind of looking at the numbers per constituency, and if we took Carlow Kilkenny, for example, there were 6,493 votes. Now, if a candidate got that in a general election, they're well in the hunt for a seat there on in a general election. So there definitely is a sentiment out there that, a political party, be it a new party or a current or a movement, there is something potentially there that could be.
Yeah, but Paul, I actually, while I become so left leaning, okay, I actually Maria Steen attempted to get on the ballot, okay, and actually supported her, and actually canvassed senators to get her on. Not because I don't agree with a lot of what she says, but I don't agree with a lot of what she says. But at the same time, I believe she was close enough to be on the ballot. She had 18, support of 18. She needed 2 more. I thought it was ludicrous that she wasn't on the ballot, to be quite honest about it. We're in a democratic country. But it was the parties, there was the major democratic parties in this country, like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who made it absolutely really difficult. And Sinn Féin too, I suppose, in a few councils, they made it difficult for people to get nominations. So I mean, I felt it was wrong, and I believe that there was.
But I think you'll find, Joe, though. I think you'll find that if she had gotten 2 independent, right, and the 2 I would pick are Jerry Crockwell and Michael McDowell, that would put her on the ballot. So
Victor Boylan as well.
Any of those would have got her over the line. I think the biggest regret I have of the whole presidential thing is I would have loved a television debate between Catherine Connolly and Maria Steen.
Absolutely.
I think it would have been box off. Like, it would have been riveting, because not because they are who they are, it's because both of them. Well, first of all, look, both Maria Steen and Catherine Connolly are barristers. Their weapon is their language. They're trained. This is what they're trained to do. Like, Heather Humphreys went in, like, she's a constituency parish pump politician. She went into a wrong competition with the wrong champion. Like, I mean, Catherine Connolly's whole enigma is based around her ability to use language and composure and control in the courtroom. So, like, the media is going to be no different. So I just think and I often said it at home and said it to a few others. It's one of those things that when you look back, it's like really regret not having Maria Steen and Catherine Connolly going head to head with Heather Humphreys, but Heather would have been the sideshow on that one. But like going head to head in a primetime debate, I thought would have been riveting because both of them, and like I've spoken to Catherine Connolly before, but Maria Steen had been on to us in Wexford County Council, and both of them would have been box office just to watch it because I mean they were, and both of them would have been respectful, reserved. It would have been just a pure on 100% battle of ideas, and it would have been box office for everyone. But you know, it is what it is at that point. For
yeah, I think where Maria Steen suffered, I don't think she was brilliantly organized. She's a very articulate person. She's very a very clever and intelligent person, but she didn't get her. She possibly would have got the nomination from us if she got it in time, you know, because she had support in the council, but she didn't get the nomination in time to the council to come.
I think, Joe,
sit,
you guys, and this is the only part of the system I'd be critical of, and this is the only part, is that you guys were meeting on the Friday afternoon and we were meeting on the Friday afternoon. And obviously, you know, you can't be everywhere because Carlo, I think, was meeting within an hour of that. You can't be everywhere at the same time. But I would have thought if she would have been serious, she should have been out of the traps earlier. Like the one thing in politics, if you're going to do it, it doesn't make a difference whether it's local council, TD, senator. If you're going to do it, first of all, you have to be committed to do it. Number two, you want to get organised and get out early.
Yes,
because if you're coming in at 5 to 12 with a 12 o'clock deadline, say, I want to be considered, you know what, you're not at the game. You don't have, you haven't got the homework done, and you don't go in unless you have the homework done. Because, you know, it's a very different game. The presidential election, I think you can see, it's a very, very different game where you have to bring your A game. You have to be 100% on the ball. There's no silver spoon for second place in this one.
What was disappointing about it from a councillor's point of view was that, like, we're always giving out about like the powers of a councillor. A councillor is you have a huge workload, but you have very few powers. And the one power we had, like to nominate a presidential candidate, that you had councils all over the country where Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were blocking a nomination, you know, blocking that power to nominate somebody to take part in the race, you know. And I thought that was really disappointing, you know, from a personal point of view, you know, for councillors around the country. I just thought it didn't do us any, it didn't pay any great credit to councils around the country.
Yeah. But I think as well there, if you look at it, even if Maria Steen was more organised or whatever the case may be, or might have mind up sooner, I don't think she would have got through the local authority system, because there was a concerted effort that they weren't voting for voting for their candidate, and that was it. I think that's fundamentally where it needs to be looked at. Like if you take, for example, if Catherine Connolly decides in 7 years that she's not going to run for a second term, who in their right mind would even want to put their name up with the amount of stuff? Like, you take it, Catherine Connolly is out the gap now, and she maybe, if she wasn't elected, she would have taken a fair battering on her, on everything that she's done down her life. Heather Humphreys, who had a glowing career as minister, and look at the way it has finished up for her. Jim Gavin might walk themselves into it, but look how he is after finishing up. Like, and then you look at a situation whereby if you had any aspirations whatsoever, let be Maria Steen or whoever the case may be, you're not going to get through the council system if they do the same thing again. And the problem you had in the Oireachtas is that Maria Steen got close to it, but she only got close to it on one issue, and that's because she was pro-life. And the pro-life candidates were being lobbied and I'm pro-life, don't get me wrong, but the referendum is over. And it's not a red line issue for me, because people have spoken, and that's it, it's done. But like outside of that, if she wasn't pro-life, she could be Maria Steen, she could be Michael Jackson, she could be anything you want. She wasn't getting on that. And there was a concerted effort there to get her on the ballot. And I do agree with you, Michael, it would have been box office. But I think RTE and the level of aggression they have towards that far right kind of ideology at the moment, I think it would have absolutely destroyed it.
But I do agree. One thing I do agree is one thing the entire campaign was down to 4 questions, and I just like, and each debate was the same 4 questions about Catherine Connolly hiring you on, Catherine Connolly representing the banks, Heather Humphreys and her husband, not that it made anything to do with anything, but a member of the Orange Order, and then Heather Humphreys, did you or did you not meet the family of the deceased? And like, and the same 4 questions were the same 4 debates. So anybody who didn't have skin in the game, you'd be looking like, Jesus, is this the best we can do? That is it really the best we can do?
Yeah, it was poor, Michael. I agree with you. It was very poor. I thought the debate inside of it was very, very poor. And not the candidates from the actual questions.
Yeah.
They were actually dirt poor now. And I mean dirt poor in the fact that you were hitting the bottom of the barrel and you were trying to drag up dirt rather than actually trying to get something of substance. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what
Yeah.
that's what I thought anyway. That was fair.
Can I just make a comment there? And I agree with you, John, really, and just, the reality is that Maria Steen was never going to get on the ticket. Just, it was never going to happen. I mean, the argument that, she should have started earlier, well, George Sheridan proves that one anyway, he was never going to he never got he was at it for 12 months, And I suppose, like, she got 20, she allegedly anyway, she had a market poll at 22% and nobody ever saw her. It gives you an idea the kind of an appetite there is there for maybe somebody of her caliber and other people perhaps that were never allowed onto, were never onto the ticket, And if I can just, Joe, I mean, you made a great contribution there and I just want to pick you up on a few little things, if you don't mind, okay?
No bother,
Yeah, I mean, just on that, for example, like the media's treatment of Maria Steen or anybody else that's challenged the status quo was never going to be tolerated. So, for example, in theatre in Dublin there last week with the Walloping Marys and Christy Moore on front of the president, now the president-elect at the time, and all the leader of the of Labour, Sinn Féin, the whole lot of them, they shouted out that at the Catholic cunts. Excuse my language, that's not my words, Catholic cunts and landlord cunts. Not one dicky bird, not of a disassociation by, sorry, no, Joe, of any of them, and nobody from the left, nobody from the media to call this out. Now, people then slate, I don't know where the far right are, perhaps the National Party, they're as close as anybody who kind of takes a middle of the road, anybody who's Catholic, you get tarnished that way. And that throws all of us under the bus. It's outrageous. I mean, with regard to crime, I'm on a bit of a roll here now. They don't have statistics. There are no statistics kept in relation to race in Ireland. But you look at the data from any other international database, take Denmark or France, and it clearly give you an explanation on that one. And like, talk about Republican. Well, John Mitchell was a racist, and there's no doubt about it. He was a paedophile.
Oh, yeah. Agree to there, Albert. Yeah,
Huh?
he went out of Spike Island, didn't he?
He did indeed, yeah, and he was an absolute outrageous racist, and you see the whole thing about, I don't know how people can square the two, like, that you can have limitless, unlimited, we have a mass problem with we have a huge problem with illegal immigration, and we have legal immigration. We just literally cannot. We have a huge housing crisis. Let me finish. I'm almost finished. I'm just finished now.
Okay.
Just look at the date. I mean, in September alone, we took in 1,890 Ukrainians international protection. It's insane.
But they're not illegal.
If people just finish now, people are making fortunes out of this, and yet our own people, ordinary people, cannot buy houses, rent houses. A house in my area, an ordinary semi-detached house, is €3,200 a month. Insane. Yet we keep piling on the fire, and then on top of that, we took in 110,000 before that in Ukrainian refugees. Nobody asked, come here. What effect was this going to have on Irish society? What is it effect on house prices? How is it going to affect our communities? You were never consulted. And there has been no critical voice, not one critical voice from anybody on the left, and anybody that in the middle ground that asks sensible questions, say, how is this going to go? You were shouted down, you were marginalised and labelled. And I'm just an ordinary fellow, and and it's so strong. Anyway, dereliction rant. Finish with my rant.
I just look, Albert. I agree with you 100% about the Ukrainian situation. I agree with you 100% about it. That they created a huge problem in the country. They brought people in, and they put 100,000 people in the middle of a housing crisis. The amount of people who are homeless in Ireland at the moment. The figures, of course, will be out on Friday, but I mean, it'll probably be another record. You see people every day that their wits end and get notice of termination, that they're going to be out of their house in 5 months, 4 months, 3 months time, and they don't know what they're going to do, And yet, and I see Ukrainians, they all have somewhere to live, they all have a place to live. There's not the same support, I think, for people from Ireland who find themselves facing homelessness that's there for the Ukrainians. And that's not the Ukrainians' fault. I'm not going to blame the Ukrainians. Like, they've come here, like there was no filter on them coming here. There was no such thing as, well, what part of Ukraine are you from? You know, are you from the west, like, you know, Vigorod, or are you from the Donbass or the Luhansk region where the front actually is? Now, I know people who come into me in the post office, and they're from Sumy, and they're from all these places that are occupied by Russia, or places that are right on the front line, you know. And of course, these people should be welcomed into the country, but there should have been a bit of perspective on what parts of Ukraine people are coming here from, you know. And that's not being racist or being bigoted or anything like that. It's just practical. And you're right, Albert. You're dead right what you said about that people, when they raise a question, that they're kind of shouted down. The thing you said about the presidential election, when they shouted those things, I wasn't aware of it. I wouldn't condone. That's terrible behavior.
The media, Joe, sorry if I got it correct. The media won't allow you to hear it. But that was an outrageous, offensive comments to attack ordinary the people. And we had the same nonsense on the day of the election from the Labour leader, Ivana Bacik, you know, questioning our democracy. I mean, the people, you know, anyway, I don't want to go into that, but it's a huge, huge problem. I mean, it's a maths problem with most people in relation to the immigration. And we have a huge problem. We have crisis in education, crisis in hospital care, crisis in housing. How can you solve that by throwing more and more people on top of that pile? It's impossible.
Just on that point,
if you question it and say, slow it down.
Yeah, just on that point there, like it's amazing. Like, sometimes eating bread is soon forgotten, because when Putin attacked Ukraine at the time, there was an overall well of support to bring Ukrainians, women and children in to look after them at the time. Now, I remember saying that the biggest issue was going to be that once you got old convents and all these places, and there'd be private people coming in making a lot of money off the back of it and pumping money in on the back of leases, that's going to happen. But if you said to the Irish people at that stage, and the war never happened, we're going to get private enterprise people to come in and do up them convents, I'm going to put you in there, there'd be an outcry. The problem we have at the moment now is we created these centres, right? And now the government now can do what they want with these centres. There'll be iPads and everything else, and they have it not by design, but just by accidentally in some ways. Now what's happening is we have private investors who have multiple housing units that can accommodate a lot of people in small rural areas that the government probably would wish if they could do that 20 years ago, but never could get it because of protests. Now they have these centres, and what's happening is we're going to see a bigger influx into rural areas, and these services will be flooded and clogged up, as you're talking about. But let's go back to the nuts and bolts of it. What's happening is that when this happened at the start, we were all in favour of it. But the problem is nobody said stop. And now what's happening is the Irish people are turning on it. But I'll just throw this out to you, lads, and I don't know what your opinions on it. What we're seeing happen in City West is thuggery. It's not right-wing kind of, we're against every immigrant that's coming into the country. And what's happening is it's very diluted. You go into your hospitals, you go into your hotels at the moment. We would not have hotels open, or we would definitely not have hospitals open if we didn't have people coming from foreign countries into our. But it's all been mixed up and jumbled. But that's why. Just on this point, I'm just asking your opinion on it. I'd be very interested to see what Michael thinks of this. Is the fact that what we see in City West and burning of Garda vans and whatnot, which I totally think is disgraceful. I think that's very much thuggery more than actually an outcry of people saying enough is enough.
Well, I tell you what, John, I wouldn't be 100% away from where you are. I think social media has a lot to do with this, and I think there's a lot of truths that people are reading that's nowhere near the truth on social media. And I think the presidential election showed the power of social media, particularly with the spoil vote. But what I think it is, I think there's a lot of people, middle of the road people, who are seeing what's perceived to be people from other countries getting everything ahead of them. Their sons or daughters are on the housing list, they're waiting for a medical card, and yet somebody can rock up here, come in out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they have a medical card. Like, I live in a county where 16% of the population is not Irish national. They're born in either a different country or they've come from a different country. And we've done our best to integrate them. But I think the middle of the road people have now come to the conclusion that, they've been taken for, and that social media has then revved this whole theory that they've been taken for, and the displacement theory, and people coming in from all over the parts of the world get proper treatment and fair treatment than they do. And then there are forces out there, and there are forces in every community that will jump on that fear, that paranoia, or just jump on that sentiment and say, well, yeah, you're right, actually, yeah, you're not getting anything, and you're paying for everything. You can't get a medical card. Your daughter or son can't get a house, but yet your man comes in from an IPAS centre in Dublin. Look at him, and then because they're different, and there it is. But I think the government has a role to play in this, and I 100% believe that places like City West, that's organised. That does not happen out of spontaneity. That thing is organised. There were people knew what they were doing, organised, bringing the crowds in from everywhere. I would say suspect a lot of them are not from the Dublin area or from the Kildare area. I think there's just people going into it. But saying that, and I think the government now have to get, and I noticed now there's been a bit of a change now with Simon Harris now. He's saying that, well, maybe we need to look at it. It's too much. I mean, if you're coming in here from Ukraine in a war-torn country and you're driving a top-of-the-line BMW, like, there's questions there. And like, now the new question is, like, all these young lads, and I say young lads between 18 and 25, are not conscripted in Ukraine. They're expecting an influx of them coming into Ireland. And
they won't
so
come back.
how are we going to handle it? Now, I would say, like, and somebody, and of course everyone is an expert in this stuff, so they're having a go and saying, oh, you can't do this. No, hold on. These are people that are highly educated, highly trained. We need them for building up the infrastructure, building up communities. But in the broader sweep, like, if you're in a war-torn area, or if you're here because you're fleeing war, you shouldn't be going back there for a start. You shouldn't be driving a car for a couple of months. Like, there's a time for us now to start saying, look, we didn't think the war would go on that long, and we didn't expect the amount of people to arrive that amounted. But we are where we are, and what we need to do now is start. And I'm not integrating now, and you could get in trouble for this one now. I don't think the integration is a question; it's assimilation, right? So, like, when you see top of the line BMWs going around with foreign plates, it's now time for them to regularize, and the insurance to regularize, and housing regularize, and medical regularize, so that at least, and this is where I think the government are losing the room, is that the people who are in the middle paying for everything can feel at least they've been treated equally to other people who are paying for nothing. And I think that's where this is all coming from. And it's a hyperbole, and it really is. But I will say this here, and we're seeing this. There's two things that really worries me about where this is all going. Is number one is the power of social media to absolutely turn this thing up. And number two is AI. And this morning, I don't know if anybody saw the news this morning, completely different, pivoting subject to a different way. They had to tell people that these pictures from Jamaica showing the seeds and all the whole area destroyed by the hurricane were actual pictures, not AI. And that the AI companies and people are out there just showing AI images of what Jamaica looked like when it wasn't it. And I think, and you know what, it doesn't make a difference whether it's a local election, a referendum, a presidential, Shannon, or Dáil election. All that sort of stuff is going to have a profound influence about how we do our job, because social media is now as judge, jury, and at some point, and I've said this to leaders at the top, at some point, judge, jury, and executioner. Somebody is going to die because somebody is going to get the wrong end of the stick, and they're absolutely. And I'm amazed at people, and maybe you guys know this. Like, if you go out with a weekend and you talk to people over a few pints, I'm just amazed at how their mind has now changed. That we are strangers in our own land. We've been invaded. We've been replacement. The Sky News today had a lady in Scotland saying that they're bringing in Sharia law in Scotland. And the question was, well, who's bringing it in? It's like, well, they are. Who's they? Like, the immigrants. And like, where are they? It's like, they're here. You know what I mean? So there is an argument there. But I have to say, right, and this is where, and goes back again, let me bring Albert back in and throw him the conch. There is room in the Irish political landscape for a centre-right movement that will come forward and say, listen, we need a small state, that we don't tax the bejesus out of everyone. We need a smart state that says we can limit the amount of people coming into the country to do what we need to do. And that if you're in the country illegally, right, and Albert Dolan, and watch that name, and go back and look at Albert Dolan's questioning of the Immigration General Secretary. 8 out of 10 of these asylum seekers are being refused.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're here legally, grand. If you're not here and you're refused, you need
But,
to go. And
but
if you can't leave
sorry,
Cork, you
Mike,
need to
can I
go.
come in there, please? Sorry, yeah, can you have a good start now? Right, okay. First of all, right, okay, the term illegal immigrant is constantly being used here tonight, right, okay, right. There's no such thing as an illegal immigrant, right? As such, the immigrant comes in, he applies for asylum, he goes through the process, right? He's either granted asylum or he's not granted asylum. If he's not granted asylum, he's deported. Now, if they come back in, then they're illegal immigrants. But they're just they would be a very, very small percentage of the 32,000 or so immigrants we have here. And the other question, the other thing I would say is that the Ukrainian situation and the others, like would call them, like the Syrians, the Afghanis, the Iranians that maybe are looking for asylum here. They're different, like, and they're handled differently because the Ukrainians were brought into into society. They were integrated, they were assimilated, they were given houses, they were helped to get houses. They had people helping them to get someplace to rent and that. Whereas the people from Afghanistan and Syria and possibly Palestine in time, I suppose, but they're not going back at any time soon. Like, they're not going back to Syria. Al Qaeda are running Syria. Afghanistan has the Taliban. So I would say like that I hear people saying about the illegals, get the illegals out, get the illegals out. There's not that many illegals there. Like, I mean, they have been deported. There's a process there on it. So I think it's probably dangerous, like, to be conflating the Ukrainians with the people in the IPAS center.
Joe, I
know,
don't think the average punter on the street draws a distinction. I actually don't, and I agree with you. And like, I
It's
know
about
where you're coming
education,
from
though. You know, it's about
Yeah,
education.
it
We need
is.
to be
It
educated on
is.
it, you know?
But I would say this to you, and
Yeah, sorry.
the problem that we have, and Albert, you'd be the same as this. Like, you could have 100,000 people here, 200,000, but all you need is one incident, and the whole thing just flares up. And that's the difficulty. And I think that's what we're seeing in City West. It may have been an isolated incident. If you read some of the reports online, it may not have been somebody who was actually in City West. It could have been a security guard or that sort of stuff. But the difficulty is people are so now hypercharged and so emotive about this thing. If they see anything online, it has to be true. It has to be true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where the trouble starts. And that's where it goes out. And now, like I said to you, I live in a town and I live in a county where we're 20% and 16% non-Irish national. And, and there's a lot of people, and even in Waterford, like a lot of people will be looking at Waterford and say, God, it's gone very diverse. It's gone very different. It's gone very, it's not like how it used to be. And like our population is changing. That's fair enough. But this is about the political management. And I would say this is where I think both parties, left and right, or wherever they come from, are not playing straight on this one, because there are a section of our electorate, there is a section of our population out there who are afraid about what's happening, and there's nobody showing them the light and saying, this is how we're going to handle it. If somebody comes in, you're not going to be displaced. You're not going to be disadvantaged by somebody coming in. And I think heretofore, and anecdotally and evidentially, I think there have been situations where people, because the government has to meet targets, social workers have to meet targets. I think in times, and I can't speak for your areas, but I can speak for my own area, that sometimes social workers will go above and beyond to help somebody rather than one of their own, because they have to meet targets. And if they don't, then this looks bad. But the difficulty is, and we'll all have this one, when things go wrong, as they invariably do from time to time, it's you, me, it's Albert, John, who'll get the phone call at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening when official Ireland are gone for dust.
But Michael, can I just say what you've just described is discrimination? So I don't think you'd endorse discrimination if you actually really thought about it, because we have all the councils, we have them here. We have a slew of integration team personnel who assist people who are non-Irish. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But I can see it. And people, I had 2 people this week. The first house I got was from somebody a number of months back, and they were 13 years and 2 months waiting on the housing list. A lot of people A lot of people got houses, Irish and non-Irish in that time. Okay, that's a problem I have. And
How many non-Irish got
can
them,
I
Albert?
just make a couple of small points,
Sorry,
right?
Albert, you said a lot of people got housing, Irish and non-Irish. How many? Like, you see, this is what I'm talking about now. This sort of kind of nebulous statement. Like, they're not entitled to houses. There's a very small percentage of houses provided
Yeah, but
under councils.
if I can just say, there's a housing list, and there's a criteria for housing. And am I making the point? Within that particular criteria, a lot of people have been waiting an awful long time. And if you're waiting an awful long time, and then you see housing going to other people, you do ask questions. That's what logical people do anyway. So, Joe, can I just make just a couple of points there? You mentioned about the Ukrainian 100,000. None of those will be going home. Okay, I was just looking at a report there last week. Now, it's comparable because it was up in Zero Hedge. Interesting report of all of the Ukrainians that went into the United States. And I imagine pattern here. 5% of them said they're going home. That's just a point. So I mean, I know, and John, you said earlier on when all this thing happened at the start, like hindsight is a great thing, or worse, that effect. We knew that, but like. I asked all these questions at the outset and I put them in writing, and you weren't allowed to have these questions. And again, goes back to the media. Now we're pivoting a little bit. The media has dictated all of this, and all the NGO apparatus within government, which is run. I mean, the administrative apparatus of this state, in my opinion, is gone. It's been run from elsewhere, and we have a slew of NGOs and all the various things, and that's driving all this agenda. Now, I mean, you mentioned there, for example, about about the social media. I don't trust any of the media. I don't watch RT anymore. I can't watch them. They distress me too much. And yesterday, now we have a situation where we're being manipulated, where we're pivoting again. All of a sudden it makes what's his name, Simon Harris, sound actually racist, because he's now going back on all sorts of stuff he went before. So like, I think, and again, just in relation to what's going on in City West, of course that's thuggery. So you don't have to tell any of us, like, I abhor violence, and I hated IRA violence in particular. And I spoke about this, Joe, inside the chamber, and I got a lot of abuse for it as well when they were on about re-establishing a New Ireland Forum. I said it's way too early for that because there's too much blood in our hands, and I hate blood. So but what you had, and I'll just finish on this. What you had in City West was a raw, visceral reaction. It was a huge and wonderful opportunity for the likes of Jim O'Callaghan and Micheál Martin to go out to the people and say, listen, you've got a problem here. We really understand your fears. Your fears aren't kind of inventions, that you understand. You have good intuition, and we'll deal with this. Hold on a second now, right? But that's what people want.
I disagree with you.
Do you think, gentlemen, that all the political leadership...
Another thuggery. That's what it was.
Well, I never said some of that was complete thuggery. Anybody attacking a guard, anybody using any form of violence or destruction of property is outrageous. But the media weren't out there for the last 6 months while people were objecting to the sale of this property. I wouldn't want it beside mine. Would you, Joe?
We have a
test. Simple question. Would you like to be beside your own?
Would I like what beside my own?
Would you like the iPad Centre? Would you like City West beside your own house?
No problem with it whatsoever.
Well,
I have no problem with it whatsoever.
You're unique, Joe.
Gentlemen, do you think politically the whole planning, the whole communication is all wrong from all the political parties? Do you think all the political leaderships in Dáil Éireann should be talking to county councillors, as you said, that the people are phoning, your front line, your grassroots? Do you think they should be communicating with clear, concise communication with all of you county councillors, and bringing you county councillors on board with the communication to talk to the local people? And have then also the political parties, the media, the NGOs, are they actually pitting everybody against one another? Not just the media, not just the people, but also county councillors against one another. And where we need, this is exactly what we need tonight. I know it's a bit heated tonight, but we need everybody around the table. I'm from Derry. I grew up with the riots. I could spot a planned riot a mile away. I grew up in Derry. I know when petrol bombs and cars, and I grew up with it. I can spot it. And I can also spot where people are being pitted against one another. I can also spot where we need everyone around the table talking from the right, from the left, from the centre, all talking and has it. And that's why I left the media. I was local media
Yeah,
and I left.
Roisin, just on that point, like what you're saying is absolutely, it's brilliant in fact that they should be communicating. If if the department were to communicate with us at the level that you're saying,
Yeah.
which is seemingly is the democratic right thing to do, what happened is there will be no Ukrainians, immigrants coming in anywhere because nobody politically would put their name to it. It actually suits politicians like myself that the department make the decision because we would never make the decision because we wouldn't be allowed because the locals wouldn't allow it to happen. So, but we have a mandate with Europe. That's the end of this. We have to bring in a certain quota of people. We have to make sure that we're ticking that box for them. Just going back to my point, the government have said on this for the last maybe 10 or 12 years where they have iPass centres in Dublin were being overcrowded. They knew they had to meet their criteria. There was a quota that was there set down from the European. I don't know what that number is. That doesn't bother me in any shape or form. But the one thing I said is when the Ukraine came, there was a huge amount of open arms and sympathy towards them. When they start opening up convents and old buildings in the middle of towns and in rural areas, I said at that stage, we are now going to be facing into a different, it won't be Ukrainians that'll be there in 2 or 3 years' time. I didn't expect it to go on as long as it did. But what I did say is that, and I've one in my town at the moment, and we welcome them with open arms. What they're doing in our community at the moment, they're on CE schemes. Someone are out working, they're contributing, they're great people, they're 60 there, you wouldn't even know there was 6 there. But the thing about it is when they move on and that's what will happen, that will be still a centre, but it won't be a centre for the Irish people because the Irish homeless people will be disgusted and be up in arms if they're put into it. But it will become an iPad centre or something along them lines because the government have numbers to deal with and the influx is going to come in. And I do believe that they have control in some shape or form. I don't believe that there's rapists and there's all these bad people coming in that they're saying coming in. There is controls there. People that are doing these jobs and vetting these people are no different than me and than anyone that's online here. You have a job to do, you're going to do it right, and you're going to do the best of your ability. So I think it's overplayed a bit. I do think we have to play a part in it. It mightn't be everyone's cup of tea what I'm saying, but I do think we have a humane side of us that actually has to tick the box in some shape or form and bring in a certain quota. I can't disagree with Michael is saying in terms of services and everything else getting blocked up, and that's where the middle. That squeezed middle that we talk about, when they see something on social media, it's very easy for them to react to it because like what Michael said is to feel that their son and daughter is not getting on the rung of the ladder because they've seen something and that's growing behind the scenes in social media. I think that's driving a lot of it.
And do you think too, when you think they're handed phones, they're all given phones, people can be tracked, traced, and monitored. So when you give someone a phone, you're actually, in one sense, you know where they are, and you know who they are. You know the communications.
But Roisin, I have no problem with the department doing their job. I don't believe the department are letting anyone in that shouldn't be in. Now we had a situation there last week. You know what I'm saying? A regrettable situation where a young child was attacked. Like you're going to, you know what I'm saying? That was shocking. But that just flared up something. But like for the amount that's coming in and for the amount that are in areas, we don't hear the level of disquiet that you see on social media. And that's why I was saying the City West. I would say yes, there might be a peaceful protest up there. But like, did any of us go up on a bus of sure worried that the country was overpopulated with immigrants? If we did, we would be on that bus and be up there with a peaceful protest. Did we even think about going up? We didn't. We didn't even think about going up. And that's why I would tie into things. And that's why I was kind of interested in people's views. Was I the only one on the same lines as that? I think that 90% of that was just pure thuggery to just get at the guards.
Absolutely. Young fellas, young lads around Dublin, just there's a great crack. We out here now, we'll set police vans alight. That's what it was all about. Basically, that's all. I don't see I get nothing on the ground here about people giving out about immigrants, right? It's very, very minority thing. You see it on social media, a couple of local headbangers, they're giving out about it. But by and large, people welcome people. We have a moral obligation, like especially as a country of immigrants ourselves, we went all over the world, and people say, "Oh, sure, we went, but we got nothing when we went places." It's a different world now, like where you provide accommodation, you provide help to people. But in time, like these people, like I see the Syrians now, they're starting to work in Dungarvan. They're working as barbers. They're working. There's one who actually got a job with the county council locally. They're starting to get involved in stuff like that, and like, I mean, we went all over the world as a country. We have a moral obligation to take people in when they're coming from areas where they're war torn and they're in trouble. We have a moral obligation. But like, I mean, it seems to be that people want zero immigration. They want kind of like Poland. Like in Poland now, it's very much like that. You know what I mean? And they want just a homogenous Polish society. But Ireland is
But
very
Joe,
much.
sorry, Joe,
Yeah.
can I just make that point? And I'm not
Yeah.
disagreeing with you, but I
Yeah.
think Michael has actually hit the nail on the head on this one. When Michael's out having a few pints, or I'm out having a few pints, the sensible people that are the middle class that are working at the moment that would never go for a riot or never throw a stone at anybody, never mind the Garda, right? They're the ones now that are they're being poisoned in some way through the social
Yeah,
media. And
absolutely.
actually,
Yeah.
and I think that's the point Michael was making.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what we're
I agree
facing at the
100%
moment.
with you. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the biggest fear, that when the silent majority are actually starting after a few pints having that conversation with Michael as the local representative, saying, "Hey, Michael, we're not happy with this," right? They're not going to be out the next morning on a bus going for a protest
No.
to burn out a van. But if that keeps growing, that's the danger, and I think that's the point, Michael. That's the point you were making. Am I right in saying
Yeah,
that?
I think, John, it's fairness. I think people are eminently fair, and they look for a fair deal, and they have no difficulty taking people into their communities on the grounds that the people are going to get involved and be fair in the community. What gets everyone's backs up is when they feel, right, whether it's true or not, and this is the difficulty, whether it's true or not, whether somebody comes in and all of a sudden they get a council house, and like they may or may not have a reason for it, or may not that stuff. But like we all have had people who are on the list 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden somebody gets a house ahead of them, right? And 9 times out of 10, there is a logic behind why that family got the house. Again, because we're local authority members and because of the eminent wisdom of central government, we can't question that because we have no role in the allocation. If we did, we would certainly have a much more harmonious housing estates. But
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty I have, what's coming across, and again, these are people who just get up and they do their work and they do their vote and they do their stuff in the community, is that by and large they're getting to the opinion where we're being taken for fools, or else others are manipulating the system against us, and we're paying for everything, and they now whoever they may be are paying for nothing.
And
And
And let's
here's
just
where I
say,
think this is where I
Michael,
think central government. Just one second. This is where I think central government have let us down, because they were very quick off the mark in 2019 and 2020 when the war started first, and the first line out to meet the people as they arrived from different parts of Ukraine to different parts of the country were local authorities, and we put together the integration area teams, and then it became centralized, and then it became more of an actual formal government policy. And the difficulty I have now is that we are now just getting edicts, and we're getting, you know, quotas, and we're being told from on high is you have to do this, have to do that. And the difficulty is when you start telling people you have to accept A, B, and C, gets their back up. It just gets their back up, and it makes their job so much difficult. Like I said to you, 16% of the population of County Wexford, and I say, Joe, the same Waterford,
can
are
I just,
non-national. They were
yeah,
born somewhere else, and you
yes,
know what?
no,
They've integrated and they've worked hard. You go into County Hall now at the moment, and many of my students who are taught economics, by the way, not that there's any correlation, they're working in County Hall now and they're contributing and that sort of stuff. The difficulty, the
yeah, but
difficulty people have
my,
is when they feel somebody arrives off the airport, gets the Rolls Royce treatment, and now 9 times out of 10 it's completely different. But it's a 1 time out of 10 when it's on social media,
that's right.
it has to be
Yeah.
the truth.
yeah,
It's
well,
like,
like, lads, you have to look at the data, really, I mean, Michael, like, we'll see now later on in the week, we'll look at the length of the housing lists and the numbers of people in emergency accommodation, the average price of a home. Well, you won't have that this week. And the fact that, there are so many tens and tens of thousands of people on housing waiting lists, that's their sense of reality. I mean, I know people that are, struggling and in terrible situations trying to cope with enormous HAPS payments. They just can't meet their, they know intuitively that their lives are getting better. They can't afford to have children because they need 2 jobs, both wage slaves in the house. As we talk about the government's eminent wisdom, I don't trust any government. This is completely different to where I was 5 or 10 years ago. I always trusted the government, because the first thing a government should do all the time is look every morning at the Constitution and the obligations that they have to us as a people, the nation, i.e. Irish citizens, whatever colour they are. It's about protecting our interests, and I think it's Article 5. It's about maintaining social and economic security. Now, not to impoverish us in any way, and that hasn't happened. So the eminent wisdom of the state, like we took in 100,000 Ukrainians. I mean, there are wars everywhere. It's a tragedy. Yes, we do our bit, but we do our bit within reason, without discommoding and impoverishing our existing people. It's about being sensible, being intelligent, about listening to people. And there is a cost in all these things as well. I mean, just accommodation alone, forget health, forget education, all the stuff that goes with all of that. Just for Ukrainians alone. I'm not blaming them. They didn't start the war. I have utmost sympathy for them, But, we're a tiny nation and somebody else decides to throw around our money. And we have people making, trading in human life, making $1.5 billion just in accommodation alone. So there's a huge cost and people see that. And I don't see any eminent wisdom in any of that. I see extraordinary arrogance. And then what they do when people, and I hate violence. Nothing to do with that kind of stuff. But there's so many people that say to me, ordinary, sensible, middle class people. Nobody ever talks nasty talk. I don't hear any of that or anything like that. But people do concerned, very, very concerned that their children are leaving the country in droves. They can't buy houses, they can't rent houses, and they put one and one together. There is an insatiable drive for property. I had somebody last week put out of their house to be replaced with somebody else, come back and to live with their mother. Their rent fell behind effectively, but they'll double their rent. Why? Because the state has an ever-ending cargo coming for them, and that's the way it works. And just finally, on one point, for people that don't and people delude themselves, Joe, that they come into this country, there's nothing such as an illegal immigrant. Jim O'Callaghan confirmed 10 days ago in the Oireachtas committee, subcommittee on whatever else, that of 89.9% of the people who present an International Protection Office in Dublin arrive here directly through the north of Ireland. That's breaking the law. That's breaking the common travel area. Nobody is turned back at the border. There's nobody talking about this. And all of this, nice people, I'm sure, they're all coming from safe countries, by the way. They all come across the pond. Nobody questions this. 33 million a week it costs to house 1 week's supply of people coming in. That's, these things, these are real money, and these have to be taken from taxes. And if they're not going there, if they're not, that's huge money. It's staggering money, and there's no stopping to it. Anyway, I'll rest at that.
Yeah, can I just make one comment on that? I don't think that's the sentiment. It's very hard to argue against that. But then when you look at the backdrop of what we've signed up to in Europe, and
Constitution trumps all. Sorry,
England have gone this way.
Constitution trumps all.
No, I respectfully listen to you, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I said to you, it's very, very difficult to argue against any point. But when you break it back down to what we know as politicians, and we're the ones that are supposed to know this in terms of how we're constituted, in terms of how we are funded through Europe and various other streams. If we want to go down that line, what you're saying is we'd have to go down the Brexit route and just completely cut ties with Europe. And how would we survive in that scenario? So if you were talking to a forum of people and you were in a conference, you get a standing ovation there now. But the thing about it is, unfortunately, the system doesn't work that way. And we have a duty of care in order for, let be from a humanitarian point of view, or let be a funding point of view, whatever way you want to dress it up, we're not going to change that. And we have to roll with that, and we get the best situation of it. And that's my opinion. And I respect what you've said. I love
what you're saying, and you're dead right. And I know that's the way it works. But our first and only duty is to the people of this nation. When we've them some way looked after, then you can afford to be generous with the largesse. but they're excluded from that. And there's a growing cohort of people who feel that way. I don't like the way they feel. I think it's very, very destructive that, that the or state officials in their eminent wisdom have brought that about. That's terrible, terrible governance. And everything that's going wrong, they must take responsibility for that. That's the way I look at it.
We're running out. We've gone over time more than running out of time.
Just, can I just say something?
I'm gonna say yes.
You can't conflate immigration with the housing crisis, and that's what seems to be done now here tonight. Like that, it's all the fault of immigrants that there's a housing crisis in the country. It's not, certainly not like. And as regards the thing about people coming through the north of Ireland, down in of course they should be turned back. And I must actually look up that. Like I'm a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm doubtful about it, but I need to check that out.
It wasn't on RTE, Joe.
Wasn't it on RTE? No.
No,
so where did it come
no,
from?
not at all. No. That's the
Where did it
government
come from?
piece, yeah.
I like
Could I suggest, gentlemen, just for that, go look at the transcript on the Oireachtas, or go look at the video of the Secretary General of the department and Albert Dolan, because I think you'll find the answer to both your questions there.
Well, Albert Dolan was quoted as saying that they were. Didn't he say that they were chancing their arm? A lot of.
That's
But
Albert
that's a phrase.
Dolan.
But
The
that's
one I'm talking
good.
about is Matt Cartier and Michael McDougall. It's a very comprehensive interview, and he's very clear, unambiguous. And I found it, as I said, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm saying, Joe, what I'm saying is, like, it's a good 10-minute video. I mean, you can say, like, they're chancing their arm, but he went through all the statistics with the department. I know some of it was correct and some of it was, it's inflammatory, whether the chancing their arm or not. And in fairness, the official held the official line that they have a job to do. This is their job they're doing, type of routine. But the only thing I would say to you is that, in the bigger scheme of things, stepping back in our community, like, irrespective of what comes in, it's like a lot of our new arrivals are not going to be going out. So we have to do our very best as public representatives to make sure they integrate and in some degree assimilate within the communities of which we serve. Correct. Because like, you can be absolutely brutal about this, that within 3 months they're going to be voters too, wherever they live. So at the end of the day, we have to that. But there is programs out there, there's funding out there where we can integrate. And you know what? And I would say one of the best outcomes of the Ukrainians coming here is that local councillors could take the lead, unashamedly take the lead, and provide the leadership to integrate them into the community, to put the facilities there, the committees there, the teams there, and to harness the absolute power of the community to rally in behind them. And I think that's where local authorities will play a blinder. Central government will come in and just throw money at it and hope it'll go. It won't. It'll be up to the people like us, for rightly or wrongly, whether we agree or disagree, we're just going to have to get on with it.
Yeah, true, Michael.
And gentlemen, and Michael, could you send us, if you can find that link of that video, and we'll put it in the description box below. Yeah,
we'll do. He did. To be fair to Joe, Albert's bottom line was that, like, out of the asylum claims that were made forward, 8 out of 10 of them were refused. And he was saying, are they chancing their arm? He did use that phrase. But what I think is important you do is watch the sequence of events leading up to that. And it's kind of forensic question about how did they arrive? Why did they arrive? What happens when they arrive? And, the official was doing what the official does best. They have a line to play. It was pure Mr. Humphreys. They had a line to play. They didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. So they were going to answer the questions as they saw fit. And at the end of it all, Albert says, well, look, if 8 out of 10, are they chancing their arms? Chances are they are. You know what I mean? And, why are they still here? But I will, I'll find the link and send it on to you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
This is what we need. We need people from the different political sectors. We need that discussion. We need to be getting the people, the ordinary people, the Joe Soaps in the streets, knowing that county councillors are working because, guys, you are the forgotten powerhouse of the political system, and we need to get everybody known that you are their voice, regardless of the different opinions, because you are public. You are representing. You're elected, so you are publicly. You are representing a cohort of people who represented you, who you are representing. Sorry, frog in my throat. it is important that we bring different sides of the political spectrum here, because this is where voices are heard, people are listened, and different opinions. And I'm from the north, and this is how we sort things out, is by sitting down together and talking to people and listening to different points of views. But so I just want to say we did invite Councillor Sean O'Hargan, the Labour Party county councillor here in Kilkenny, and but unfortunately he had swimming lessons tonight, so he couldn't join us.
Sink or swim.
Well, it's Joe, the councillor Joe Roisin, you can certainly swim.
Well, he certainly doesn't need armbands, I'll tell you that.
Thanks, Michael.
But it's been lovely having you on, Joe, and it's always lovely to actually have new county councillors, because you all need, especially the new county councillors, with listening to the likes of John and Michael saying about motions, about where to look for the money, as we started off, where where to look for the money. You can call the executive into account. But it's lovely. We just want to give a platform here on the Irish Political Roundup to you, the county councillors, because the work that you do, it does not get recognised nationally, never mind internationally, but it doesn't get recognised even locally. People look for the TDs. The work that you do, it should be recognised more, and that's what we're trying to do here.
And as you said, Roisin, councillors are the boots on the ground, and we talked about, as Michael said, we talked about integration. I said the local councils, they're going to have a big role in help in a lot of things. So it just goes to show the importance of local democracy here in Ireland.
And if I just may say how important you are for giving us this platform, Paul, Roisin, thanks really so much. And lads, it's really lovely to chat. It's great to meet you again, Joe. Great to meet you for the first time, and really love the chat. It's nice to air one's views, and we learn from each other, which is really wonderful.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it, lads. I enjoyed the battle. That was a good one. Good one tonight.
Well done, lads. Well done. We live to fight another day.
Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks,
and thank you all for coming and joining us here on the Irish Political Roundup's County Councillors Caucus Roundtable.
Thanks, folks.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Take care, all.
Bye-bye.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.